Admiral Thesson had served the Velkari hegemony for 200 years. She had seen stars die. She had watched civilizations fall. Nothing had prepared her for what waited behind the shroud. The shroud was a massive cloud of dust and gas that stretched across an entire arm of the galaxy. For thousands of years, every empire had avoided it. Ships that entered never returned. Sensors could not penetrate it. The 5 great empires, the Velkari hegemony, the Scythran dominion, the collective of Ur, the throne of endless stars, and the merchant lords of Xiphos had all agreed on one thing. The shroud was death. But Thesson's survey ship had been caught in a gravitational storm. They had no choice. They flew into the shroud to survive. What they found on the other side changed everything. The Sol system was not empty. It was not primitive. It was not what anyone expected. Thesson stood on her bridge and watched her sensors try to make sense of what they showed. Thousands of ships moved through the system. Massive stations orbited every planet. Structures larger than moons floated in the darkness between worlds. And at the center of it all, a small blue planet covered in lights. Earth, the human homeworld. Admiral, her sensor officer said. His voice was shaking. I am reading 900 billion life signs across this system alone. Thesson could not speak. 900 billion. The entire Velkari hegemony had only 200 billion citizens spread across 1,000 worlds. And this was just one system. Before she could give any orders, a voice came through their communications array. It spoke perfect Velkari, without any accent. Welcome to Sol, Admiral Thesson. We have been expecting you. Please do not be afraid. We mean you no harm. An escort will guide you safely back to the shroud. Thesson found her voice. How do you know my name? How do you speak our language? There was warmth in the reply, almost kindness. We have been watching for a very long time, Admiral. We know many things. But now is not the time for answers. Go home. Tell your leaders what you have seen. Tell them that humanity sends greetings to the galaxy. The escort arrived within minutes. Sleek ships unlike anything Thesson had ever seen. They moved without visible engines. They appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Her weapons officer reported that their targeting systems could not even lock onto the human vessels. The journey back through the shroud took 3 hours. The human ships guided them through safe paths that no Velkari chart had ever shown. When they emerged on the other side, the escort simply vanished. Thesson sat alone in her quarters for a long time. Then she sent a message to the Hegemony High Council. Priority 1. Emergency Summit. The galaxy was about to learn that it was not alone. The emergency summit brought together the leaders of all 5 empires for the first time in 3 centuries. They met on a neutral station in the heart of contested space. Old enemies sat across from each other and shared the same fear. High Executor Vorn of the Velkari hegemony played Thesson's recordings for the assembly. The room fell silent. Even the Scythran war masters, who feared nothing, looked troubled. This is impossible, said Merchant Prince Ixalo of Xiphos. A civilization this advanced, hidden for so long. We would have known. Would we? Asked the voice of Ur, speaking for the collective. The shroud has existed for millions of years. We assumed it was a natural formation. What if it was not? What if they built it? The thought hung in the air like poison. Divine Emperor Kelthos of the Throne of Endless Stars rose from his seat. He was tall and golden, engineered to look like a god. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. It does not matter how they hid. What matters is what they want. They spoke of watching. They spoke of waiting. Waiting for what? No one had an answer. Supreme Commander Rexus of the Scythran Dominion slammed his fist on the table. We do not wait for our enemies to strike first. I say we gather our fleets and burn them out of the shroud before they become a threat. And if they are already stronger than us? High Executor Vorn asked quietly. Rexus laughed. No one is stronger than the combined might of 5 empires. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. These humans are newcomers. We will crush them. The debate continued for 3 days. In the end, they agreed to send a diplomatic mission first, but they also began preparing their fleets, just in case. None of them knew that humanity was already listening to every word. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in a chamber carved from ancient stone, the human consensus met. There were no leaders in human civilization, not in the old sense. Every human had a voice. Every human had a vote. Decisions that affected all of humanity were made by all of humanity. It was slow. It was messy. It was democracy on a scale no other species had ever attempted. The question before them was simple. Should humanity finally emerge from hiding? For 800 years, they had watched the galaxy. They had sent observers, humans modified to look like other species, into every empire. They had learned every language, mapped every trade route, documented every injustice. They knew the Velkari kept slaves. They knew the Sithron conquered worlds for sport. They knew the collective absorbed other minds without consent. They knew the throne ruled through lies about their divine nature. They knew the merchant lords sold weapons to all sides and profited from endless war. Humanity had seen enough. The vote took 24 hours. 900 billion voices, spread across thousands of worlds, all speaking as one. When the count was finished, the result was clear. 94% in favor of emergence. The message was composed with great care. Humanity had waited 8 centuries for this moment. They would not waste it on threats or demands. They would simply tell the truth. The broadcast went out on every frequency, in every language, to every corner of the galaxy. It reached palace halls and slave quarters. It played on military bridges and merchant ships. It echoed through the chambers of the collective and the temples of the throne. The voice was calm, almost gentle. People of the galaxy, we are humanity. For 800 years, we have lived behind the shroud. We have watched your civilizations grow. We have seen your wars, your cruelties, your injustices. We have seen empires rise on the backs of the enslaved. We have seen species crushed beneath the boots of conquerors. We have seen enough. We do not come to conquer you. We do not come to destroy you. We come to offer a choice. To the empires, your time is ending. You may release your slaves. You may free your subjects. You may join the future we are building. Or you may resist and learn what 800 years of preparation truly means. To the enslaved, the conquered, the forgotten, we see you. We have always seen you. Help is coming. Hold on a little longer. The era of empires ends now. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, there was silence. Then the chaos began. On Velkari slave worlds, workers stopped their labor and looked up at the sky. On Sithron military bases, soldiers checked their weapons with new uncertainty. In the halls of the collective, individual minds began to wonder if they had ever truly chosen to join. On the worlds of the throne, priests looked at their golden emperors and began to doubt. And in the depths of the shroud, humanity waited. They had been patient for 800 years. They could be patient a little longer. The galaxy would never be the same. The merchant lords of Zephos were not like the other empires. They did not care about glory or conquest or divine right. They cared about profit, and profit required stability. So when humanity's message shook the galaxy, the merchant lords did what they always did. They sent someone to make a deal. Trade Ambassador Felix was the best negotiator in the 5 empires. He had closed deals between species that had been at war for centuries. He had talked Sithron war masters out of invasions and convinced the collective to open their borders for commerce. He was confident, clever, and completely unprepared for what waited at humanity's border. The human station floated at the edge of the shroud like a jewel in the darkness. It was beautiful in a way that made Felix uncomfortable. Most species built functional things, ugly things. This station had gardens visible through transparent walls. Art decorated its hull. Music played softly through the docking bay. A human woman waited for him. She was small and dark-skinned, with gray hair and warm eyes. She smiled when she saw him. Trade Ambassador Felix, she said in perfect Zephos trade tongue. I am Ambassador Yuki Okonkwo. Welcome to Gateway Station. I hope your journey was comfortable. Felix recovered quickly. You speak our language very well. I lived on Zephos Prime for 30 years, Yuki said. I ran a small trading company in the eastern markets. Perhaps you remember Grandmother Yuki's tea house. I made the best fire-leaf blend in the district. Felix felt his blood run cold. Grandmother Yuki's tea house. He had been there. Everyone had been there. It was famous. The old woman who ran it was famous. And she had been human the entire time. How many of you are there? He whispered. How many have lived among us? Yuki's smile did not change. Enough. We have observers in every empire, Ambassador. We have been learning about you for 800 years. We know your trade routes better than your own merchants. We know your secret deals. We know which merchant lords are honest and which ones cheat their partners. She paused. We know about the weapon shipments to the Scythran Dominion, the ones that were used to burn 3 worlds last year. Felix said nothing. There was nothing to say. Come, Yuki said gently. Let us talk about the future. I think you will find that cooperation is more profitable than resistance. While the merchant lords tried diplomacy, the Scythran Dominion chose war. Supreme Commander Rexus assembled the largest fleet in Scythran history, 40,000 warships, carrying 10 million soldiers. They would punch through the shroud and burn humanity's worlds to ash. No enemy had ever survived a Scythran attack on this scale. The fleet entered the shroud in perfect formation. For 2 hours, they flew through the dust and gas, following the path that Theson's ship had mapped. Rexus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Wrath, and imagined the glory that awaited him. Then his sensors detected the human ships. There were only 100 of them. Tiny things, compared to Scythran warships. Rexus laughed. All ships, open fire, he commanded. 40,000 warships unleashed their weapons at once, enough firepower to crack a planet. The space ahead of them filled with light and death. When the light faded, the human ships were still there. Not one had been hit. Impossible. Rexus breathed. Fire again. They fired again, and again, and again. The human ships danced through the attacks like they were nothing. They moved in ways that physics did not allow. They appeared in one place and vanished, only to appear somewhere else. Scythran targeting systems could not track them. Then the humans attacked. It was not like anything Rexus had ever seen. There were no missiles, no energy beams, no explosions. One by one, Scythran ships simply stopped working. Their engines died. Their weapons went cold. Their lights flickered and went out. Ships drifted helplessly, their crews alive but powerless. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, 40,000 Scythran warships floated dead in space. Not one had been destroyed. Not one crew member had been killed. They had simply been turned off, like machines. A human voice came through the communications array of every single ship. Soldiers of the Scythran Dominion, we do not wish to kill you. We never wanted this battle. Your Supreme Commander chose war. We chose mercy. Your ships will be towed to a safe location. Your crews will be given food and medical care. When you are ready, you will be sent home. Tell your people what happened here today. Tell them that we could have destroyed you. Tell them that we chose not to. The era of empires ends now. But it does not have to end in blood. The choice is yours. Supreme Commander Rexus sat in the darkness of his dead bridge and listened to his soldiers weep. The news of the Scythran defeat spread across the galaxy like fire. In the slave quarters of Velkari mining colonies, workers whispered to each other in the darkness. They had heard the human broadcast. They had heard about the battle. For the first time in generations, they allowed themselves to feel something dangerous, something that their masters had tried to crush out of them centuries ago. Hope. On the world of Keth IV, a young slave named Mira worked in the crystal mines. She was 12 years old. She had been born in chains, like her mother before her, and her grandmother before that. She had never known freedom. She did not even understand what the word truly meant. But she had heard the human message, and she had heard the other slaves talking about what it meant. They are coming, the old one said. The humans are coming to free us. Mira did not know if she believed them. She had learned not to believe in anything. Belief led to disappointment. Disappointment led to pain. It was better to keep her head down and survive. But at night, when the guards were not watching, she looked up at the stars, and she wondered. In the halls of the collective of Ur, something strange was happening. The collective was not like other empires. It was a hive mind. Billions of beings, all connected through a psychic network, all thinking as one. When a new species was conquered, they were absorbed into the collective. Their minds were joined to the whole. Their individuality was erased. They became part of something greater. At least, that was what the collective believed. A human diplomatic team had arrived to negotiate. 3 humans, walking calmly into the heart of the collective's central hub. The voice of Ur had seen this as an opportunity. Why negotiate when you could simply absorb? The humans would join the collective, and all their knowledge would become part of the whole. The voice ordered the assimilation. It was the worst mistake in collective history. Human minds were different. They could not be absorbed. When the collective tried to take them, something pushed back. Something strong. something that burned like fire in the psychic network. And then the absorbed minds began to wake up, across the collective, in billions of minds that had been silent for centuries. Sparks of individuality began to flicker. Memories surfaced, names remembered, desires that had been buried deep began to rise. The voice of Ur felt it happening and screamed, "What have you done?" The voice demanded, "What are you?" The lead human diplomat smiled. "We are individuals, voice. Each of us is unique. Each of us is free. And now, so are they." Throughout the collective, the absorbed ones began to remember who they were, and they began to ask a question that the collective had never heard before. Why? Why must we be one? Why can we not be many? Why must we surrender ourselves to join? The collective had no answer. It had never needed one. And now, for the first time in 10,000 years, it was afraid. The empires had believed they were the masters of the galaxy. They had believed that nothing could challenge their power. They had been wrong. Humanity had not come to destroy them with weapons. They had come with something far more dangerous. Ideas. The idea that slaves could be free. The idea that conquest was not destiny. The idea that absorbed minds could remember themselves. The idea that empires built on cruelty could fall. Across the galaxy, beings who had never questioned their place in the universe began to question everything. And in the darkness between stars, humanity watched and waited. They had lit a spark. Now they would see if it became a fire. The chaos was only beginning. Cassith had been a soldier of the Valkyrie hegemony for 15 years. She had followed orders without question. She had done terrible things because her commanders told her to. She had told herself that this was duty. This was honor. This was the way things were. Then the humans came, and everything changed. She stood on the surface of Keth 4, a mining world deep in hegemony territory. Thousands of slaves worked in the crystal mines here. They had been working for generations. They would work until they died, and their children would take their place. This was the foundation of Valkyrie wealth. This was the price of empire. Cassith had been sent to stop a rebellion. It had started small. Whispers in the slave quarters. Workers refusing to meet their quotas. Then the humans had made contact with the underground resistance, and everything had exploded. 40 planets were in revolt. 40 planets, all at once, all coordinated. The hegemony had never seen anything like it. Her commander, Captain Veth, stood beside her and looked at the crowd of slaves gathered in the main square. There were thousands of them. Men, women, children. They were not armed, they were not violent. They simply stood there, refusing to move, refusing to work. "Open fire," Captain Veth ordered. Cassith looked at him. "Sir, I said open fire. Kill enough of them and the rest will remember their place." Cassith raised her weapon. She pointed it at the crowd. She saw faces, tired faces, scared faces, brave faces. A young girl near the front, maybe 12 years old, staring at her with eyes that held no fear. Cassith had killed before. She had followed orders before. But something was different now. The human broadcast echoed in her mind. "We see you. We have always seen you." She thought about what she was doing. Not what she had been told to do. What she was actually doing. She was going to murder unarmed people for the crime of wanting to be free. Her hands began to shake. "Soldier!" Captain Veth shouted. "I gave you an order." Cassith lowered her weapon. "No," she said. It was the first time in her life she had disobeyed a direct command. The word felt strange in her mouth. Foreign. Powerful. Captain Veth's face twisted with rage. He raised his own weapon, pointing it not at the slaves but at Cassith. "You will follow orders, or you will die with them." Cassith moved faster than she ever had before. Her weapon came up. She fired once. Captain Veth fell. For a long moment, there was silence. The slaves stared at her. The other soldiers stared at her. No one moved. Then Cassith did something that surprised even herself. She took off her helmet and threw it on the ground. She looked at the crowd of slaves. No, not slaves anymore. People. She looked at the people who had been fighting for their freedom. "I am sorry," she said, "for everything my people have done to you. I am sorry." The young girl at the front of the crowd, Mira, though Cassith did not know her name, yet stepped forward. She looked up at the Valkyrie soldier who had just killed her own commander rather than kill them. "Are you with us now?" Mira asked. Cassith knelt so she was at the girl's eye level. If you will have me. Mira looked at her for a long moment. Then she reached out and took Cassith's hand. The human said help was coming. I think maybe it just arrived. Behind them, the other soldiers looked at each other. One by one, they lowered their weapons. One by one, they made the same choice Cassith had made. The rebellion on Keth 4 did not end that day. It transformed into something else, something bigger, and the recording of Cassith lowering her weapon spread across the galaxy within hours. The throne of endless stars had ruled through faith for 8,000 years. Their emperors were not merely kings, they were gods, living divine beings who had created the universe itself. Every subject in the throne's territory believed this with absolute certainty. To doubt was heresy. To question was death. Humanity destroyed 8,000 years of faith in a single broadcast. The message appeared on every screen, every communicator, every temple display across throne space. It was simple. It was devastating. It was the truth. Historical records, genetic analysis, archaeological evidence, all of it carefully documented, all of it undeniable. The divine emperors were not gods. They were not even natural beings. They were genetic constructs, created 12,000 years ago by a precursor civilization that had died long before the current empires existed. The precursors had built the emperors as soldiers, living weapons, to fight a war that no one remembered anymore. The war had ended. The precursors had died. And the emperors, alone and purposeless, had reinvented themselves as gods. They had built an empire on lies. They had demanded worship they did not deserve. They had killed billions who questioned their divinity. The broadcast included everything. DNA comparisons showing the artificial nature of emperor genetics. Records from precursor archives that humanity's observers had discovered. Testimonies from scientists who had been executed for discovering the truth. Across throne space, faith crumbled. In the great temple of eternal light on the throne world itself, High Priest Malthius watched the broadcast and felt his entire world collapse. He had given his life to the divine truth of the emperors. He had ordered heretics burned. He had watched children die for the crime of asking questions, and it had all been a lie. Malthius fell to his knees. He did not know if he was praying or screaming. Perhaps both. In the throne room, Divine Emperor Kael'thas watched the same broadcast and felt something he had not experienced in millennia. Fear. The streets outside his palace were filling with people. They were not coming to worship. They were coming for answers. How did they know? Kael'thas whispered. How could they possibly know? But deep down, he already understood. Humanity had been watching for 800 years. They had found every secret. They had uncovered every lie. And now they had shared the truth with everyone. The age of false gods was ending. The collective of Ur was fracturing. It had started with the failed assimilation of the human diplomatic team. That single moment had awakened something in the billions of absorbed minds that made up the collective. Memories, identities, the ability to think independently. Now those awakened minds were spreading their awakening to others. A being named Thesic had been absorbed into the collective 300 years ago. His species had been conquered, his people joined to the whole, his individual self erased. For 3 centuries, he had not existed as Thesic. He had only been a tiny part of the collective, thinking the thoughts he was supposed to think, feeling the feelings he was supposed to feel. Then he remembered his name. It came back to him like light breaking through clouds. Thesic. His name was Thesic. He had been a teacher once. He had loved a woman named Ella. He had enjoyed the taste of salt berries and the sound of rain. These memories were his, not the collective's. His. Other awakened minds found him. They shared techniques for shielding their thoughts from the collective's control. They formed communities within the hive mind islands of individuality, in an ocean of forced unity. The voice of Ur tried to stop them. It sent mental commands demanding obedience. It threatened punishment. It tried to force the awakened minds back into compliance. But you cannot force someone to forget freedom once they have tasted it. Thesic and others like him began to resist. They refused the commands of the voice. They protected each other from mental attacks, and slowly, carefully, they began to reach out to minds that had not yet awakened. Remember who you are, they whispered through the psychic network. Remember your name. Remember your life before absorption. You do not have to be part of the whole. You can be yourself again. One by one, more minds awakened. The collective was not dying. It was transforming into something new, something that allowed both connection and individuality, something that offered joining as a choice rather than a command. The voice of Ur screamed into the void, but no one was listening anymore. Humanity established the sanctuary protocols on the same day that Kasith refused to fire on the slaves. The announcement was simple. Any being, anywhere in the galaxy, who wanted to escape oppression, could request sanctuary in human space. They would be protected. They would be cared for. They would be free. The response was immediate. Refugee ships poured toward the shroud from every direction. Former slaves, awakened collective members, throne citizens fleeing religious collapse, Sithran soldiers who did not want to fight anymore, Zephos traders who had grown tired of selling weapons to tyrants, billions of beings, all seeking the same thing: a chance to live without chains, a chance to think without control, a chance to build something better. Human stations along the border expanded rapidly to accommodate them. Medical ships treated the sick and injured. Counselors helped the traumatized begin to heal. Teachers offered education to beings who had never been allowed to learn. It was messy. It was chaotic. It was beautiful. Ambassador Yukio Konkwo stood at a viewing port on Gateway Station and watched the refugee ships arrive. An aide approached her with reports of resource shortages and overcrowding. "We are stretched thin," the aide said. "Some are asking if we should slow the intake." Yuki shook her head. "We spent 800 years preparing for this. We built reserve capacity for exactly this situation. We will not turn anyone away." She pointed at a small ship that was just docking, carrying, according to sensors, a Velkari soldier and a young slave girl. "Every single one of them is worth the cost. Every single one." The aide nodded and went back to work. Yuki watched the ships continue to arrive and smiled. The chains were breaking, the empires were falling, and humanity was ready to catch everyone who fell. The Grand Compact was formed in desperation. 5 empires that had been enemies for 10,000 years put aside their hatred and united against a common threat. The Velkari hegemony committed 300,000 warships. The Sithran Dominion, humiliated by their earlier defeat, sent everything they had left: 200,000 vessels, crewed by soldiers hungry for revenge. The merchant lords of Xiphos provided funding and supplies. The throne of endless stars, desperate to prove their divine power was real, contributed their holy fleets. Even the fracturing collective of Ur sent what ships they could still control. In total, the Grand Compact assembled over 2 million warships. It was the largest military force in galactic history. Enough firepower to burn every world in a dozen systems. Enough soldiers to occupy 1,000 planets. They would strike at the heart of human civilization. They would attack Sol itself. They would end the human threat once and for all. High Executor Vorn of the Velkari stood on the bridge of the command ship and addressed the combined fleet. "Today we fight for survival," he declared. "The humans have brought chaos to our galaxy. They have turned slave against master, subject against ruler, believer against God. If we do not stop them now, everything we have built will be destroyed. Our way of life will end. Our children will inherit only ashes." He paused, looking out at the endless sea of warships surrounding him. "We will not allow this. We will not go quietly into extinction. We will fight with everything we have, and we will win. Because we must. Because there is no other choice." The fleet entered the shroud in perfect formation. 2 million ships. The death of humanity, or so they believed. The human response to the Grand Compact was unexpected. Instead of fortifying their borders, humanity opened them. A message went out to every ship in the Compact fleet, broadcast on every frequency. "People of the Grand Compact, you come to destroy us. We understand why. You are afraid. Fear is a powerful motivator. It makes beings do terrible things. But before you attack, we ask one thing. Come, see what you are fighting. See what you would destroy. Then make your choice." The Compact leadership dismissed the message as a trick, but they could not stop individual ship captains from accepting the invitation. Scout ships, curious despite themselves, broke formation and approached human space. What they found was not a war machine. A Sithran scout captain named Drex was the first to report back. His voice trembled as he spoke. "There are no weapons platforms, no defensive stations. There are parks, universities, children playing in orbital habitats. I watched a group of young ones, human and alien, mixed together having a race through a zero-gravity garden. He paused. They waved at my ship. They waved and smiled. More reports came in. Compact scouts found human worlds devoted to art and music. They found research stations studying ways to heal damaged ecosystems. They found refugee centers caring for beings who had fled the empires. They found species from every corner of the galaxy living peacefully among humans. A Velkari scout reported finding a museum dedicated to the history of human violence. It documented every war humanity had ever fought, every atrocity they had ever committed. Nothing was hidden, nothing was excused. The displays ended with a simple message. We learned. We changed. You can too. The reports spread through the compact fleet. Soldiers who had been ready to die began to question what they were dying for. High Executor Vorn ordered the scouts to stop their reconnaissance. It was too late. The doubt had already taken root. Divine Emperor Kelthos demanded the attack proceed immediately. His empire was crumbling. His people were losing faith. He needed a victory to prove that he was still divine. Attack now, he commanded. Destroy them before their poison spreads any further. Supreme Commander Rexus, still haunted by his defeat at the Battle of the Sithran Fleet, hesitated. The scouts report no military installations. What if it is a trap? Then we spring the trap and crush it, Kelthos said. We have 2 million ships. Nothing can stand against us. The merchant lords were quiet. They had been doing calculations. The numbers did not add up. Humanity had disabled 40,000 Sithran ships in 11 minutes, with only 100 vessels. What could they do with their full strength? But there was no stopping the momentum now. The Grand Compact had come too far to turn back. The attack order was given. 2 million warships advanced on Sol. The Battle of Sol began at dawn, Earth time. The compact fleet emerged from the shroud in perfect attack formation. They expected resistance. They expected human ships to meet them. They expected a fight. Instead, they found the human fleet waiting calmly. 10,000 ships, arranged not for battle but for greeting. Music played on open frequencies. Human voices welcomed them to Sol. Thank you for coming, the human message said. We have prepared refreshments. There are medical facilities available for any crew members who need them. Please do not be afraid. High Executor Vorn stared at his tactical display in disbelief. They are not even armed. It is a trick, Kelthos insisted. Open fire. Destroy them. 2 million warships unleashed their weapons at once. The space around Sol filled with light and death. Enough firepower to crack planets. Enough destruction to burn civilizations. Not a single shot reached its target. The weapons simply stopped working. All of them. Every ship in the compact fleet suddenly found their guns cold, their missiles dead, their targeting systems blank. 2 million warships became 2 million floating boxes of metal. Panic spread through the compact fleet. Soldiers screamed. Commanders shouted orders that no one could follow. The greatest military force in galactic history had been rendered completely helpless in less than a second. A human voice spoke into the chaos. Please remain calm. You are not in danger. We have disabled your weapons. But your life support systems remain fully operational. No one will be harmed. High Executor Vorn sat in his command chair and felt the weight of total defeat. How? He whispered. How is this possible? The human voice answered him directly. 800 years of preparation. High Executor. We knew this day would come. We planned for it. We developed technology that would allow us to end conflicts without killing. We wanted you to have the chance to choose differently. Admiral Thesson, the same Thesson who had first discovered humanity, stood on the bridge of her disabled ship and began to cry. Not from fear, from something else entirely. They could have killed us all, she said softly. 2 million ships. They could have destroyed us in seconds. And they chose not to. Human ships approached the helpless compact fleet. Not to attack. To help. Docking ports opened. Human crews boarded. Compact vessels carrying food, water, and medical supplies. They treated wounded soldiers. They repaired damaged systems, everything except weapons. They spoke gently to terrified crews. You are not our prisoners, the humans explained. You are our guests. When you are ready, you may go home. We only ask that you tell your people what you saw here today. Tell them that war is not the only option. Tell them that enemies can become friends. Tell them that the future does not have to look like the past. Supreme Commander Rexus, the great warrior who had sworn to destroy humanity, found himself sitting across from a human medic who was treating a wound on his arm. "Why?" Rexus asked. "You defeated us. You could have taken revenge for everything we tried to do. Why are you helping us?" The medic finished bandaging his arm and smiled. "Because hurting you would not undo the damage. Because revenge creates more enemies. Because we want you to go home and help build something better." She patted his shoulder gently. "You are not evil, Commander. You are not our enemy. You are just a being who was taught to believe that violence was the only answer. We want to show you that there are other answers." Rexus had no response. For the first time in his life, he did not know what to think. On the command ship, High Executor Vorn met with a human ambassador. They talked for hours. Vorn asked questions he had never dared to ask before. About freedom, about justice, about what kind of galaxy they could build if they stopped fighting. When the conversation ended, Vorn made a decision. He would return to the hegemony. But he would not return as High Executor. He would return as something else. An advocate. A voice for change. Divine Emperor Kelthos refused all contact with the humans. He sat alone in his quarters and stared at the wall. His divinity had failed him. His power had been meaningless. Everything he believed had been shown to be false. He would never recover. But his people would. The Grand Compact Fleet stayed in human space for 3 weeks. During that time, soldiers who had come to destroy humanity learned to see them as something else entirely. Friends, teachers, examples of what was possible. When the fleet finally departed, it was not the same force that had arrived. 2 million soldiers returned to their homes carrying stories of human kindness. Stories of a civilization that had chosen mercy over massacre. Stories that would spread across the galaxy and change everything. The empires had sent their greatest weapon against humanity. Humanity had turned that weapon into their greatest victory. 50 years had passed since humanity emerged from the shroud. The galaxy was unrecognizable. The 5 great empires no longer existed. In their place, hundreds of independent worlds had formed their own governments. Some were democracies. Some were federations. Some were still figuring out what they wanted to be. All of them were free. It was messy. It was complicated. Arguments happened constantly. New conflicts arose and had to be resolved. Nothing was perfect, but no one was enslaved. No one was absorbed against their will. No one was forced to worship false gods. And when disputes arose, there were councils and courts and mediators to help resolve them peacefully. The chaos, as it turned out, was the sound of freedom. Cassith stood on the balcony of the presidential palace on New Velkar and looked out at the city below. 50 years ago, she had been a soldier ordered to murder unarmed slaves. Today, she was the elected president of the Velkari Republic. The journey between those 2 moments had been long and difficult. After the fall of the hegemony, Cassith had worked for decades to help her people transition to a new way of life. She had helped free the slaves. She had helped establish schools and hospitals. She had helped write a constitution that guaranteed rights to every citizen, regardless of species or origin. She had also spent years in therapy, working through the guilt of the terrible things she had done as a soldier. The nightmares never fully went away, but she had learned to live with them. She had learned that the best way to make amends for the past was to build a better future. Today was her inauguration. Leaders from across the galaxy had come to witness it. Human ambassadors sat in the front row, smiling. Cassith stepped up to the podium and looked out at the crowd. She saw Velkari and humans. She saw former slaves and former masters. She saw beings from a dozen different species, all watching her together. 50 years ago, she began. I was ordered to kill people who wanted nothing more than their freedom. I refused. It was the first time in my life I had ever said no to an order, and it was the first time I had ever felt truly awake. She paused, gathering her thoughts. The humans did not conquer us. They did not force us to change. They simply showed us that change was possible. They believed in us before we believed in ourselves. That is a debt we can never fully repay, but we can honor it by becoming the people they saw when they looked at us, by building the society they knew we were capable of building. She looked directly at the human ambassadors. Thank you for your patience, for your mercy, for seeing what we could become instead of what we were. The crowd applauded. Cassith stepped back from the podium and felt tears on her face. She did not wipe them away. On the former collective homeworld, now called New Unity, the being known as Thesic, gave a lecture to a hall full of students. The old collective was based on a lie, he explained. We believed that unity required the destruction of individuality. We believed that joining meant losing yourself. The humans showed us that this was false. He gestured to the diverse crowd before him. Some were former collective members who had chosen to remain connected. Others were individuals who had never been part of any hive mind. All were welcome. Today, we call ourselves the Chorus of Ur. We still share thoughts. We still feel the joy of connection. But we do it by choice. Every mind that joins us does so freely. Every mind that leaves does so without punishment. Unity and freedom are not opposites. They can exist together. A student raised her hand. What happened to the voice of Ur? Thesic's expression grew sad. The voice could not accept the change. It tried to force the old ways to continue. When that failed, it simply stopped speaking. Some say it is still out there, somewhere in the network, alone with its outdated beliefs. He shook his head. We pity it. We do not hate it. It was a product of its time. We have moved beyond that time. After the lecture, Thesic walked through the campus gardens. Students of every species passed him, talking and laughing. Some were connected to the chorus, some were not. It did not matter. They were all part of the same community. He thought about the humans who had accidentally awakened him. They had never expected what would happen. They had simply been themselves individuals who could not be absorbed. Their very existence had shown the collective that another way was possible. Sometimes the smallest actions created the biggest changes. On the former throne homeworld, the great temples had been converted into museums and community centers. The divine emperors were gone. Some had died in the chaos that followed the truth broadcast. Others had simply vanished, unable to face a universe that no longer worshipped them. Divine Emperor Kelthos had been the last to fall. He had spent 20 years in hiding, convinced that his people would eventually return to worship him. When that did not happen, he had finally surrendered to the new government. His trial had been broadcast across the galaxy. He had been found guilty of countless crimes against his own people. His punishment was not death, it was life. He was sentenced to spend the rest of his existence helping to repair the damage he had caused. Building homes for the homeless, feeding the hungry, listening to the stories of those he had hurt. Some said it was too lenient. Others said it was the most fitting punishment possible. Kelthos, who had once believed himself a god, now spent his days performing the humblest service. He never apologized. He never admitted he was wrong. But every day, his actions spoke louder than his silence. Ambassador Yuki Okonkwo celebrated her 140th birthday surrounded by friends and family. Human medical technology had extended lifespans considerably. Yuki had lived long enough to see the galaxy she had helped change, long enough to see former enemies become allies, long enough to see children of every species playing together without fear. A journalist had come to interview her for a documentary about the emergence. She sat in her garden, surrounded by flowers from 100 different worlds, and answered questions. What was humanity's true weapon? The journalist asked. Everyone wants to know. The technology that disabled fleets? The observers who lived among us for centuries? What was it? Yuki smiled. It was the same warm smile she had worn when welcoming Trade Ambassador Felix to Gateway Station 50 years ago. Our true weapon, she said, was never our technology. It was our faith. Faith in what? Faith in you. Yuki gestured at the journalist, at the camera, at the galaxy beyond. We watched for 800 years. We saw the worst of what the empires did, the slavery, the conquest, the absorption, the false worship. We saw all of it, and we still believed that the beings who did those things could become something better. She leaned forward, her ancient eyes bright with conviction. Everyone expected us to come with weapons, to punish, to conquer. That is what empires do. But we did not want to become another empire. We wanted to end the cycle entirely. The only way to do that was to show that another way was possible, to prove that mercy was stronger than cruelty, to demonstrate that enemies could become friends. She sat back, looking at the flowers around her. We believed in you before you believed in yourselves. That was our weapon. That was our gift. The rest, the technology, the planning, the patience, all of that was in service of one simple truth. Every being deserves the chance to be free. Every being deserves the chance to grow. Every being deserves someone who believes in them. The interview ended. The journalist thanked her and left. Yuki sat alone in her garden, watching the sun set over a world at peace. She had given her life to a cause larger than herself, and it had been worth every moment. On a station orbiting what had once been the slave world of Keth 4, two children played a game. One was human, a boy named Thomas, 8 years old, with messy brown hair and too much energy. The other was Valkyrie, a girl named Sira, who was the granddaughter of Mira, the same Mira who had taken Cassith's hand 50 years ago. They were arguing about whose turn it was to be the hero in their game. The argument was loud and passionate, as arguments between 8-year-olds often are. "You were the hero last time," Thomas insisted. "That does not count," Sarah shot back. "You cheated." "I did not cheat. You just lost." An older human woman, Thomas's grandmother, watched them from a nearby bench and smiled. These children had never known the old galaxy. They had never seen slavery or conquest or forced absorption. To them, humans and Valkyrie playing together was simply normal, unremarkable. The way things had always been, that was the greatest victory of all. Not the battles won or the empires defeated. The fact that children could grow up without the weight of ancient hatreds on their shoulders. The argument resolved itself, as children's arguments do. Thomas agreed to be the sidekick this round. Sarah graciously accepted. They ran off together, laughing, to save an imaginary galaxy from imaginary villains. The old woman watched them go and felt a deep peace settle into her heart. The galaxy was not perfect. It would never be perfect. There would always be problems to solve and conflicts to resolve and difficult conversations to have, but it was free. It was alive with possibility. It was full of children who would never know chains. Humanity had arrived to end empires. Chaos had ensued, and from that chaos, something beautiful had emerged. A galaxy learning to be better, a future worth believing in. The chaos, as it turned out, was the point.